So in this session, we'll discuss a very basic thing, which is DDL and DML. So what are DDLs and what are DMLs? Now, if we want to connect to the database, we want to retrieve the information, if we want to store some information, we said that we write some queries or statements, right? So those queries or statements which are written using an SQL, those can be categorized into different things, like some queries come under DDL, some queries come under DML. All right. So a DDL basically is a data definition language. So it these queries help us to create and modify the structure. Okay. And DML, on the other hand, is a data manipulation language. So this deals with data. Okay. So let me help you with an example. All right. So if you look at this Excel sheet, right? So here we have something called as an employee. And if you look at this table, so if you look at this, right? So we have employee ID. So if you look at this column, you see that the values are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So they are all numbers, right? And all of them have like just one digit, right? So next you have something called as employee name. So these are all names, right? So I don't have anything like an ID here because these are basically names, right? Now in similarly salary, I have the numbers which are like a 4 digit, which not salaries are not a single digit, right? And similarly departments, I have 2 digits. So what we are doing here is like we are saying like this information belongs to employee, so we are naming it as employee, and then we basically create this fields, which is employee ID, employee name, salary, department, and then we have rules in that saying that hey, employee ID is like single digit number, employee name is a string, which is basically a test, right? And salary is like 4 digits or something, and department number is again a number. So what we are doing here is we are basically telling, creating a structure. We are saying, hey, the name is employee, and it has fields like employee ID, employee name, salary, department, and these things have like what kind of data that we are storing. Like employee name, we are storing only string, we are not storing integers. Similarly, in employee ID, we are storing IDs, which is basically numbers. We are not storing string or text value. So these are basically, we are defining a structure. So this is something which we can do using something called as DDL commands. Okay. So you define a structure, right? So you will have this. Now, let me just make this a little bit clear. So this is basically a structure. So you have no data. All you have is you have a name, what this is. You have the fields, which basically tells you like, okay, what does this table contain? What it is supposed to be contained, right? Each field, what data it is supposed to contain, right? This is structure. This is your DDL. Now, with this is not useful for us, right? Without data, that this is not useful. So now we'll need to add the data. So what we will do is we'll again write commands. So these commands are called as DML commands. DML are commands which is data manipulation language. So basically these are the commands which help us to write the data, which helps to delete the data, which helps us to modify this data. So what we can do is like, using a DDL command, I can insert this data here, right? So let's say I have inserted 5 records here. This is basically a DML operation. So you are dealing with data. You can also modify this data, right? So here I can modify this salary and I can say 2300 instead of 2200. Again, this is a DML command which is used to modify it. You can also delete this data, right? So this is again deals with data. So we use a DML command to delete this data, right? So all these DDL commands and DML commands, we will learn step by step. So this is just for an understanding like what is a DDL, what is a DML. All right. Okay. Now, like we have made some changes to the data, right? Similarly, we can make changes to the structure. So here I can add a new field, right? So let's say city. Again, I'm only modifying the structure, right? So this again comes into DDL. So there are different commands for creating a DDL. There are different commands for creating a DML. So we'll see it step by step. Don't worry about that. But this is basically the definition of DDL and DML, why they are. So we'll create a simple table here, and then we'll keep on adding. And more and more commands we will see at a later stage. Okay, so this is just an introduction. So I'm gonna go here, and here what I'm going to do is I'm gonna take another file here, right? Instead, I don't want to use the same file, so probably uh, I'll create another file. Okay, I'll create another worksheet. Okay, all right. So yeah, I will need to increase this. I think I need to zoom in a little bit, right? I hope this is fine, or maybe not, right? So let me just zoom in again. Okay, so you need to do this in each sheet. That's a problem. Okay, fine. So the first thing what we'll do is, so let me rename this first. So I'm gonna rename this as DDL and DML basics. I'm gonna save this. So first thing is we need to create a structure, right? So here the structure we will create. So we'll create the same structure here. Okay. So we have to give a name. So this is basically a table. So we'll create a table. Again, don't worry about all these things. We will again talk about all these things in the upcoming session. So this is treat is more of a like theory for you just to understand what is DDL and DML, right? So a table is basically rows and columns. So this is basically columns, right? And this is basically rows. So this is basically what table is. So I'm going to create a table, right? So I have DDL command which says create table, and then you need to give a table name. So I'm calling my table name as EMP. So now this is basically a table. Inside this table, you need to define what this table contains, right? In this case here, I'm saying that my table contains these values, right? Employee ID, name, salary, department number. So we'll do the same thing. So first is employee ID. So I'm saying this is employee ID. Now we need to give a rule saying that, hey, what does this employee ID store? So this employee ID will store numbers and two, right? This is basically two digits. It can only store up to two digits, right? So this is basically called as data type. Data type will tell you like what kind of data this particular field is. Again, we have a separate session for this if you don't get it. But yeah, let me just quickly run through this commands, right? Next, we have employee name. So employee name is basically varchar, right? So varchar basically is for string. So here I'm going to say 15 characters, right? So which means like you can go up to 15 letters, including space. All right. So now the next what we have is salary, right? So salary, again, it is a number, but this time I'll give it as four digits, right? Then what we have is department number. A department number is again number. This time it is two, right? So observe here, right? Each of these fields are separated by a comma, right? And at the end, you don't need to create a comma, and then you end it with a semicolon. So this is a DDL command for us to create a structure, which is a table here, right? So let me select this and I will run it. Okay, I think I have already created another table with the same name, right? So yeah, this is fine. I'm not going to edit this out because I want to make sure that all the errors that we see here, you understand what this is. So if you look at this, right, this failed because it says the name is already used. So I would have already created this. So don't worry, I will just create a table called as employee instead of EMP. So I'm going to go ahead and execute here. So now here you can see this table employee is created, right? Now if you go to the navigator here, so you can see this. This is a table we created. So earlier I created EMP and EMP1, right? So this is a table that we have created. So if you expand this, you have the employee ID, name, salary, and department, right? So all these details are here. So this is a DDL command. Now, if I want to add another, let's say I want at some point I realize that, hey, I would need to actually add one more field to this, right? So for that, another you can do is you can add a DDL command, which is called as alter. So I'll say alter table. What is the table that I want to alter? I want to alter a table called as employee. And what do I want to do? I want to add another column. So let's say, what is that column I want to add? I want to add a column, let's say city, right? And this city is a varchar and it is 10 characters. So I'm going to go and I'm going to execute this. Now look at this here, right? So I have employee name, salary and department. So when I execute this, so this thing gets refreshed and you can see here, let me pull this up. You can see table employee altered, right? So and if you go back here and click here, so you will see that city is getting added, right? So these are basically your DDL commands. Again, there is a separate session to go through all this DDL commands. We'll create a table, we'll alter those tables with data, all those things are there. So, but please do understand like what is being done here. So this is a DDL. Now, the next thing is like if I do a select star basically tells you, it will give you the data, right? What is there in this table, right? It is try to retrieve all this information. So at this point there is no items, right? Because we created a structure but we did not insert any data into it, right? So let me just insert one record. Okay, so this is basically, now it is a DML command, right? So in a DML command we use a DML command called as insert to insert the data into the table. So I want to insert into the employee, then use something called as values. All right, so you can specify what are the columns that you want to insert the data. So you have employee ID, ename. This is a good practice. So sometimes we may not be inserting all the values. We'll only insert some values. So it is always good for us to ensure that we provide the details here. So again, we'll see all these details at little later. Okay, now what are the values? So what is the employee ID, right? So I can say employee ID is one, name, right? So let's say John. So see I am using a string, right? So you need to enclose this in quotations. For numbers, you don't have to enclose in quotation. Even if you put a quotation, does not matter. So for example, if I put salary 2300, it's a number, but I put in quotes, it won't make any difference. But if I remove this, right, then it will be a problem. So I'll show you that as well. So let's first execute this. So let's say salary is 2300, department number is 20, city is New York, right? Now I'm going to remove this. Okay. So when I remove this and let me execute this and I will show you the error message. So it will be, see, I got an error message here, right? See, column not allowed here. So that, because string, that is your text messages, must be enclosed in a course. That is the reason why you found this error. So I'm going to put this. And if you look at this here, it is not enclosed. It's a number, you don't have to enclose, but I did enclose this here. Still, that is not a problem. Okay. So I'm going to execute this and you will see that one row is inserted, right? So now when I go back, and I go back to this and I execute this statement, select star from MP, I will see this record here. See, so this is your DML command. So a DDL command is only giving a structure. A DML command is where you are inserting the actual data, right? So this is the basics of DDL and DML. A DDL is for structure, a DML is for the data. In the next few sessions, so we will look at each of the DDL commands, each of the DML commands in detail, and we'll create a bigger tables and you will have more practice there. But this session is basically for you to understand what DDL is and what DML is. All right. So, okay. I hope this was helpful and I'll see you guys in my next session.